Welcome back to this second part of the tutorial or review or comparison, however you want to name it. I hope you all enjoyed part 1. If you haven't watched it, I would suggest to dive into part 1 first to get up to date and to know what I'm actually doing here. I have also written part on my website with all the stills, so make sure to check this one out too. You just have to create an account, but you don't need any plan. It's a totally free tutorial, just in case as an info if you're watching this on YouTube. And today, as you can see, I updated Genesis and also Filmbox. This is named Filmbox Pro now. And again, I grabbed all the screenshots, and as I just stated, they're in the written part, so you can compare version 1 to version 2, what has changed. And I will also show you some of it today, but we need to move a bit faster with this one. So essentially, I will show you all the features in Genesis and all the new features within Filmbox. In part 3 of the tutorial, I will also grade underneath both plugins, because maybe that's a bit misleading up until now. And I think I forgot to mention it in the first video part. It's in the written form, but just in case you missed it, I don't see either of them, or essentially no single DCTL or plugin, as a one-click solution. So you always should work underneath them. So I don't see our profession as a one-click solution. Maybe that's the case when you're having a super high-end shooting LUT and you're working with A-level DPs like Roger Deakins or similar. Then maybe it is a one-click solution and you just need a quarter point of offset and the image looks perfect. But at least I'm not having these clients, and I always have to do some manual work and tweaks, or sometimes even fixing the footage if it's a documentary or some run and gun stuff. But don't get me wrong, I totally love this. And of course I would also love to work with guys like Roger Deakins, but I'm in the wrong country for that. Anyways, let's get started. So as you can see, when we're starting with Genesis, you have a lot of input spaces, and I think that's nice. So you can work in ACES if you need to. DaVinci Wide Gamut, really popular at the moment. Or you can just stay camera native with basically all the big camera brands we need. I think it's perfectly fine what's available here. And the other big thing with Genesis is, I already had it in the written part, they have a ton of negative stocks. So all the Vision 3, the current ones, then a lot of Vision 2, even some Vision 1, as you can see in here, and also some of the EXR stocks. One of them got used within the Joker LUT, the infamous one. I also shot some EXR charts. Totally love this stock, and they go even further with the old Eastman ECN2 and ECN1 stocks. So they have probably the whole timeline from Kodak films. As you can see, 16 daylight is insane, very slow stock, very early in the beginning of film. And they also have some of the Fuji Eterna stocks, and if you know me, you know that I totally love them. So you really have a ton of options in here. Then you have your development process, you have push-pull effect, which works really nice, and you can enable an exposure compensation for push and pull, or leave it off. So as you can see, then the exposure is not automatically changing, but when you keep it, it is. Works nice. Then you have interlayer effects. I think that's the first plugin that actually incorporates them, if they're real interlayer effects. I'm not here to judge that, and my knowledge up to this point is too limited, because interlayer effects are very, very complicated things. But as you can see, you get some info when you're having the mouse for a longer time over the text, and it boosts the interaction between red, green and blue layers of the negative, and values above 1 will lead to increased saturation and below 1 to decreased saturation. And essentially, I think what it does is, as you can see with the chart in here, you increase saturation, or decrease as you've just read, but basically I would say you increase saturation without affecting the tone scale. Nice thing to have anyways, no matter if it's a true interlayer emulation or not. Then there's the bleach bypass, and I already told you this in the written part in part 1. I think that's one of the nicest bleach bypass effects out there that I have seen, at least, because you really get this kind of silvery feeling, and it just kind of feels right, and I really love this. And it's also great that you have a negative bleach bypass and you can also do it separately on the print. I think that's also unique to this plugin and I totally love this. And you can also have your neutral negative curves enabled if you want to. So basically that you don't get any split toning. Then there are printer points. So as you can see, they're working the other way around because they're working on the negative. So if you increase red, you get cyan, vice versa. And the same is true for magenta and green and yellow and blue. And once again, you could also just gang them. And for example, I guess that can come in handy if you do the push-pull effect and then gang the printer lights down to counterfeit, and you can get some really nice looks out of it. So as you can see, this works really well. And to be honest, maybe as an addition to the first part of the tutorial, I found the negative and the print profile a bit underwhelming, if you want to say so. And if you want to put it a bit in a harsh way, I probably just expected more because of the name dropping and how it was marketed. But I really love all these effects in here. It's kind of the better thing why to use this stuff instead of the profiles. Maybe it's just also because I have great profiles in place already, but it's really disappointing once again that you can't split this up with negative and print and just use it as a DRT, because I would love to use all these effects without the DRT and having the negative and the print profile in place. All right, let's disable everything I did real quick again. So I think we're back to default now. And then after the printer points, we have the print stocks. And again, we have a ton of them. So we have 2393. These are probably the two most popular ones. And we also have two Fuji ones and a lot of Eastman color ones that I haven't seen so far. I also have EXR print stock already, but I don't have like these low contrast ones in here. That's what the LC is standing for. And also not the old Eastman prints. So that's also a nice thing to have. And I want to dive into these ones soon. And so you also have the popular ones like the 3513. This one is kind of unique for this plugin again. I have this one too, but it's really sad that they don't have more Fuji print profiles like the 3510, I think it is, or something like that. So that would be not a great addition. And as I said, you can also do print bleach bypass, which is different to the neg bleach bypass because the one is more heavy on red, green and blue and the other one on cyan, magenta, yellow. Again, you can do neutral print curves and then you can have your display target space, which is also nice because they have HDR in here too, and the other P3 versions. You have HDR peak luminance. I won't dive into this one right now because we can't, or I at least can't stream HDR for now, and also a preserve color, but they're nice things to have and great that they're in there. And we have an elation and grain, so you can go to performance or precision. You have 16, 35 or 65 millimeter and a strength slider, and the same is true for the grain. And you additionally have a saturation slider too. You can export 3 LUTs in 33 for in-camera use, as you can see, or the 65 one for post-production. And I didn't dive into that one yet, so probably that's something I will touch on in part 3 of the tutorial. So as you can see, tons of options, great features in here. And now let's compare it to Filmbox. So one big advantage is, as you can see, I have 2 instances now. This one is called Filmbox and this newer version is called Filmbox Pro. For me, that's totally amazing because with updates, as you can see, you still have both in place. That means if I'm pulling out an older project from the archive and I haven't rendered a lot or I use the halation or the grain, then I still have access to all the data that I've set back in the days. And unfortunately, at this point of time, this is not the case with Genesis. So it always installs a new version and the colors get rendered slightly different and so on and so forth. But if I understand the emails from the team correctly, they're working on this, that it's basically the same as with Filmbox, so that you also have all the legacy versions in place for your project archives. But if you're using these plugins, especially if you're using the color modes like the negative and the print or stuff like that, I would always suggest to render a lot just to be on the safe side of things and that you have a backup. There can always be problems with a license or I don't know, things can happen. And then you have at least a LUT in place, and for halation and grain, you usually find a workaround. But if you don't have the negative and the print profile in place, you can be in real trouble, I guess. But that's not something specific to Filmbox, but I would do this also with Genesis and any other plugin. So sorry for the off topic, but I think it's important. All right, so let's go through Filmbox Pro. Ton of new features, and again, also feature packed as hell. So you have Cinema Vision 3, which refers to the current stocks produced by Kodak. Then you have expired stocks in place, Ektachrome ECN2, which is a positive stock, and bleach bypass. And additionally, you also have C41, black and white, and reversal E6, which are again positive stocks. And I just had a typo in here. Ektachrome ECN2 is actually a negative stock, or to be more precise, a positive stock cross-processed in ECN2, and because of that you get the very magenta negative out, and then you can process this negative however you want to. But if you follow my website closely, you probably are familiar with it already, because I did this on my own, and it's a very nice experiment, and you get really nice looking profiles out of it. And maybe I will compare it in a future tutorial to my version of a Ektachrome cross-processed one. So yeah, that's just another thing to have in place. So if we have Vision 3, you see you have the classic 50T, 200T, and 250T and 500T negatives in place. Then with expired stocks, you have Vision 2, Vision, and EXR. We've seen these three also within Genesis. So tons of Vision 2 stocks, tons of Vision 1 stocks. Unfortunately, they don't have the 800T, but I shot a chart with it on my own. So I have this gem in my repository anyways, but I think it's really sad that they hadn't had the chance to profile it, because I would be interested in this too. Then EXR stocks, they also have a bunch of them, infamous 200T, and then they have Eterna, pretty classic ones, Eterna Vivid. Again, I think these are all the Vivids available. The Super Fs, also Fuji stocks. I especially love the 64D, and I still have to shoot this chart and profile it on my own. And they have some other ones like Riala and Plus X, which is a black and white stock, also nice to have. Then we have Ektachrome ECN2, so we can't really change anything in here, that's as is. Then we have bleach bypass with full, and then with 10% steps up to half, and as low as 10%, also really nice profile. Color C41, so a lot of famous photography stocks like the Fuji Pro 400H or Portra 400, and again they have a ton in here like rest classic ones, basically really all the stocks available more or less, even the new Phoenix, some retro ones, Cine still, which basically is Vision 3 stocks without the ramjet, so they removed the ramjet that you can process it in C41. And some stylized ones like Ektachrome in C41, red scale films, and also black and white ones. Then they even have their own category with black and white, so all the famous black and white stocks like Tri-X, Delta, and HV5. And again, as you can see, it really takes a long time. They also have the Street Bun, for example, or some autochromatic films like the Ortho 80, and so on and so forth. I'm not able, I think, to dive into all of these profiles, because then this tutorial will get way too long. Last but not least, as you can see, some E6 too, which are positive stocks again. So some nice gimmicks in here. Then, as you've probably seen while I was clicking through, you always have different modes. So you can go full emulation, which basically is like Genesis, that you have the negative and print in one node. You can do negative only or print only. Totally love this, because you can split it out into different nodes or use just parts of it. And also you have halation and grain only. Also totally loving this. Super amazing to have this flexibility. Then as source, we get even more in here. So you have all the classic ones like ARRI, Red, and Sony, but you also have some Fuji, DJI, Leica, Apple, you name it. Basically everything's in there. Even if you have footage that's already Rec 709, Gamma 2.4, for example. Also great thing to have in place. Then you have an exposure, temperature, and tint slider, just in case you need it for the camera. Then of course you can say if you want 16mm, 35 full frame, or 65. You can choose your stock, and you can gamut compress if you need to or if you want to. You have cyan, magenta, yellow thresholds and also the distance, so you can even fine tune your gamut compression. It's really, really sophisticated and can work great if you need to, but usually I think it's good if you just leave it on and forget about it. At least I didn't use it up to this point, so also my experience is a bit limited with it. Then the very, very nice halation mode. I totally love this halation. Maybe choose a different shot for it. So let's go in here, or maybe even choose this one. So as you can see, if I enable and disable it, it's really, really nice. That's the 16mm now, and I'm totally loving it. So you can fine tune it. You can have 35, so that's a bit less, or 65, which is even lesser. And you can also do your radius, strength and sharpness. I think that's working totally amazing, and I really, really love this halation and use it for years. It's really my go-to. I'm totally sold on it. What's new is the aura, and as you can see, you can increase or decrease the radius, the strength and green channel. I hope you can see this well enough, so I think now it's even better. Again, I think it's really amazing addition, and I think they added this because of a simulation of the Cinestill stocks, because if you remove the ramjet from the Cinestill stocks, then there is way more halation in place, because basically the ramjet was to tame in the halation, which got recently replaced by the AHU, the new update from Kodak from the stocks, which is an anti-halation unit, but let's don't go into detail for now on this. And then you can also fine tune the saturation, the red, green and blue channel of the halation. So again, really, really nice thing, and you can fine tune it immensely, and I totally love it. Then you have grain. So once again, different stocks, different sizes, strength and saturation. And you have a ton of new features in here. The dust was in the first one already, but then you can do softness, roughness, streaks, de-squeeze, tonal distribution within the shadows, midtones and highlights. Or you can go to advanced and have many different zones. And you can even check with the false color. You have a channel mix, so how much is in the red, green and in the blue area. The granule brightness and darkness, and once again you can enable dust if you need to. And I don't know if it's just me, I probably have to dive in a bit deeper with all the parameters here in place and try to make a profile that I like, basically. But anyhow, out of the box, it still feels a bit too overlaid for me. I think actually it's looking good and it's looking fine. But anyhow, as you can see, if you play it through, I think this still looks way better than when it's played. Of course, it's a lot and I overdid it here, but still I think it looks a bit overlaid if you're asking me. But yeah, maybe I'm a bit, I don't know, crazy. Let's put it like this. When it comes to grain, I'm also never satisfied with the grain that I dial in with personal presets that I have. I always feel like it's still a bit too overlaid. But it's great, and I loved all these new additions, and I will try to dive in more deeply and give you an update on it. Maybe it's just me, and I will find a preset that I totally love. And one more thing, you have the gate wave in place with Filmbox. It already has been in there in the first version, and again, I totally like this one. Then you have lab controls, so I think it's pretty similar, or at least kind of similar to Genesis. You can neutralize, you can dial in the vibrance, so basically how colorful your image should be, the density, the contrast, and push-pull process. It's a bit more gimmicky and the math is different and the behavior, but I think the intention would be the same as with Genesis, to provide more customization with all the film stocks. You have split tone in place, and you can choose the hue of the split tone, the high intensity, shadow intensity, pivot and dead zone width. But as you can see, it gets really, really crowded if you want to dive into all of this. And then you also have printer lights in place. So it works the other way around. So it's probably different than Genesis, because if you add red, you add red. So it's not really on the negative, or they just have the math in place for inversion. I don't really know. So as you can see, it works both ways around, but I don't really know if it will make a difference. And then you have acutance, and I think that's a really nice new addition. So maybe let's go into another shot, because I added tons of stuff in here already. So let's start a bit from scratch. And as you can see, you can do fine detail, fine edge detail, balance, sorry, fine size and coarse detail. And I totally love this new thing to dial in the texture. Super amazing feature. And last but not least, it's so long already. As you can see, it's super feature packed. You have full, which is film print, standard, which is a bit less contrasty. So that's probably a mistake I made in the first part. I think I compared everything to standard because it was the default, I believe, on the first version. But the new stills I have in full and in standard for you. And then you have extended range, which is kind of telecine transfer, so it's less contrasty. Or you also have a custom mode, which is great, so you can adjust your tone curve, as you can see, the color, the neutralize, balance, and the black point. So amazing thing to have in place. And as you can see, you can also do ACES or DaVinci White Gamut, so resolve color management, and you have SDR and HDR in place too, and many different display color spaces. So again, pretty similar to Genesis. And of course, you can also export a lot and go to the user guide, which is amazing to dive into all these things in detail. Of course, this was a very rough overview, but as you can see, it takes a long time already just to show you all the things that are in here. So I think one of the greatest features is all these different profiles, and that you can split it up with negative and print. So that's a really nice thing to have in place. So for example, to have a full emulation in here, and then go to your lab and again play around with, for example, printer light settings to get in a wash or something like this. And as you can see, then you can really customize your things as with Genesis. And I think that's where most of these plugins shine, if you dive really in and play around with all these different settings. One thing I prefer over Genesis, but maybe I have to dive deeper and split it out in different nodes, is that I can easily apply bleach bypass on every stock. And I think that's not possible here in Filmbox Pro, at least with my limited time now. So that would be one advantage that I really think is where Genesis shines, that you can easily dial in bleach bypass on every single combination of stocks here and do a combination with all the other things. But yeah, let's see. I think we can also find a workaround if we do negative only and split it up to different nodes. I will show you in part 3 all this stuff. So yeah, my roundup would be that Filmbox Pro is even more feature-packed than Genesis. It's insane, at least for all the profiles available. It's really crazy how many different films they profile, and that really takes a huge amount of work. And also the new additions within the lab in here are really nice. For me, the best addition is the acutance one. Totally love it. And for Genesis, my roundup would be that I think the starting point is a bit generic, so to say. Sorry if it sounds harsh, but you can really dive in and create some beautiful effects with all the push and pull and bleach bypass and the printer lights in place, and maybe even ganging the stuff together or to have a more dramatic effect or whatsoever. But yeah, that's where these plugins really shine. And thanks a lot for staying that long with me. In part 3, I will dial in one look, do some simple corrections underneath it, also render out LUTs, compare it to generic ones or even free ones available out there. And last but not least, we maybe even need a 4th part to make this all happen, so that these parts do not get too overwhelming. So once again, let me know if you have any input, what you want to see in the last part, or if there's a ton of requests, I will even do a fourth one. So thanks for staying with me and see you soon on the next part. Bye!